I don't like to start off on a depressing note, but let's face it, life can be full of disappointments. For example, gravity is such a disappointment because it always lets down. Could you imagine the disappointment of a wolf that knew its descendant would one day turn out to be a pug? They will say that you should never meet your hero because it will be such a disappointment. They will inevitably not be the person that you always imagine them to be. But I would argue that that's not always the case. Back in 1977, I was a young 22-year-old petty officer, hard to believe, isn't it, serving in the Royal Navy frigate HMS Scilla. And we deployed to the West Indies for 3 months. It was tough back in those days, but someone had to do it. Our first port of call was Bermuda. And on the first night, a few of the sailors from the ship fell into a hotel bar with the odd lemonade or so, and they bumped into a certain Gareth Edwards. Now, the term sporting legend is much overused these days, but Gareth Edwards was and is a true sporting legend. Ask Ellen the smiling salts at this point. He has been described as arguably the finest rugby player to have worn the Welsh jersey. And in a poll of international rugby players in 2003, he was voted the greatest player of all time. Well, the next day we had a rugby match against the Bermudan police. And a pair of boots of approximately the right size were found, and Gareth turned out for the ship's team. In those days, I played hooker in the front row, and Gareth Edwards was my strong half. It just doesn't get any better. I was playing alongside one of the greatest rugby players of all time. Needless to say, we ran up a cricket score against the poor, unsuspecting Bermuda police team, and I've been telling this story to anyone who would listen, and plenty that don't want to listen for the last 40 years. It was a momentous occasion, an experience of a lifetime. But just imagine for a moment that you had the chance to meet, not with a great sporting legend, but to meet with God himself, in person, right there, right in front of you, right alongside you. Wouldn't that be the most incredible thing that you could possibly dream of? The very thought is outrageous, so preposterous, so totally and impossibly unfeasible. How could you meet God himself? That's exactly what us crazy Christians claim what happened. Not to some sort of spiritual mystic alone in a remote cave somewhere, but to a group of 12, to a wider group of friends and followers, to hundreds and indeed crowds of thousands. They met, they walked, they talked, they listened and touched God himself. None of them really understood at the time, and in the early days only a small number began to realise what had happened after he had left them. The reading comes from the beginning of John's Gospel. I'm going to skip a few verses. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. But we've got to wonder, why would God step out of the glories of heaven, where he's worshipped and adored by the angelic host, and come into this very chaotic, sinful and messed up world? The word Emmanuel means God with us. God steps out of eternity and into history. The divine becomes human, incomprehensible, and to many, unbelievable. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And so he became human, he became a helpless baby, totally dependent on his father and mother for his very survival. God becomes man. It is surely a mystery. And that he was a man, we can have no doubt. He knew love, tenderness, kindness, and compassion, celebration, and laughter, and triumph. But he knew hunger, thirst, tiredness, pain, rejection, condemnation, betrayal, torture, and death. He didn't appear in the palace of a mighty and powerful king, pampered and costumed. He was born in a grubby stable, of all places. He was a working man, a carpenter with strong arms and tough, hardened hands. But we still haven't quite answered the question, why? Well, part of the answer, but not the whole answer, because there are another couple of sermons to come, is that God had decided to reveal himself in a way that had never happened before or since. It's said, of course, that God reveals himself in creation. And in the Psalms, we read, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Many say they find it impossible to believe in God. Well, I consider the universe and find it impossible to believe that a bunch of matter could just randomly rearrange itself into the amazing creation we see before us. Perhaps that's another subject for another time. And in the Old Testament, God revealed himself by speaking directly to individuals such as Adam and Noah and Abraham and Moses and so on. He revealed himself in the physical world, in a great wind, in a burning bush, in a pillar of fire. He revealed himself through the many prophets, through history, by the spoken and written word. And the whole Bible tells us the story of God who interacts with us, those he has created. Sometimes through very dramatic ways, and sometimes through subtle and gentle ways. But now, here was something completely different. God reveals himself in the person of Jesus, who, as Paul writes in Colossians, is the image of the invisible God. Not, of course, in a physical sense, but in his nature, in his character. We can see in Jesus his holiness, his righteousness, his compassion for the poor, the lost and the lonely, for those who suffer. We also see his righteous anger at injustice and corruption and religious hypocrisy. God does not quietly ignore or overlook these things. Remember the overturning of the tables in the temple. We can see his forgiveness, his grace, his love for us. In one sense, this was nothing new, because God has revealed his character throughout history. But if we ever doubted it, that God was some kind of remote figure sitting on a throne on a cloud with a big long flowing beard, looking down with disapproval at almost everything we do, then Jesus disapproves that view. Here was God himself, literally hands-on, in amongst the laughter and the joy, the tears and the muck and grime of his creation, in total commitment to me and to you. We live in an extraordinary time in history when God has revealed himself, when he's made plain that which was partially hidden. I love the honesty of the Gospels, because they often paint the disciples in a less than flattering light. They jostle for position, they get things totally mixed up. they fail to see what's right in front of them. They are human. And in the final hours before the trial and crucifixion, a disciple asked Jesus, "Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us." Jesus gently answered, "Don't you know me, Philip, even after I've been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." So if you want to know what God is like, look to Jesus. And maybe, perhaps for the first time for you, we can begin to consider a question. Is the Christmas story simply a legend, a fairy tale for children? Or is there the possibility, however unlikely or improbable it might seem, that maybe, just maybe,